Hello, and welcome to this sort of new video thing. Before I get going, I'd like to thank everyone who hung around on Patreon while I worked through Dark Arts, which really took me out of the headspace of working on science fiction. And I hope you enjoyed that. I know not everyone is a big fan of horror. That's not why a lot of people signed up. But horror was one of those genres that I wrote occasionally before I got any attention in 2008 with the first Light Chronicles, which was the original name for the Spinner Fringe Broadcast Zero Origins book, because that was originally a trilogy. I actually wrote one, two. Okay, so in terms of horror, I wrote a couple short stories. A couple of those went nowhere, as in they were all about the beginning and the middle, and they really didn't have much of an end. But I was, in my defense, a teenager. And later, when I was 18, I hand wrote a book that was a little over 120 pages single spaced. It might have been a little less than that, but it was huge and it sucked. It was terrible. I wrote it, read it, and then burned it in the backyard behind the apartment building that I was in, and still don't regret it. Um, and there were elements of horror in the first fantasy novel I finished before then. Um, I think I worked on one other horror novel before Dark Arts, and then I did a short that was between 7 and 10 chapters, which I serialized on my original blog, which is still up. You can go see that if you go to my site on Blogger. And then I wrote Dark Arts, which was a lot of fun. And I could tell while I was editing it that I was having a lot of fun. The world building in it was interesting, even many years later. And sorry, I have a playlist going on my laptop here where I have the questions that I'm going to be addressing. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't write a script for this video, so. But I had a lot of fun writing Dark Arts, but I didn't take a lot of time to polish it. I think I did one edit and it was very fast and the book went straight out. Um, I blame impatience and overconfidence because I know I wrote that between a couple Spinward Fringe books and my career was on the rise. Um, big, like I was getting big gains book over book with Spinward Fringe. And wow, my hands look huge. Perspective is weird. I'll try to keep them back here so I don't give anyone fever dream material. Anyway, and I have a head cold I'm getting over, so I know a little bit about fevers. I just had one the other night, so the cold is fading away. But enough of that aside. Yeah, I think I was just overconfident in those days. I thought I could release and people would love it. And I didn't have confidence in myself as an editor, just as a writer, and I let things go. So editing Dark Arts this time over was interesting, and I did one edit. Well, okay, I'll rewind a little bit. On the bus last year, my way to my brother's place, um, which is about 5.5 hours of a ride, I started reading Dark Arts. I started reading Dark Arts, the original published book, and recognized that the writing was not up to modern standards. It wasn't even up to standards of the day. It required polish. There were parts that required a little bit of a clarity pass, so it wasn't totally clear what characters were doing. And but the material was good enough so that instead of pulling the book down and canceling everything, i.e., the pre-orders that have been long standing, too long for the second book, it would be worth going back and doing a polish pass, which means, change none of the characters, do not change the story. Um, so basically, leave everything the same, especially the general feel of the book, um, which gets really, really dark for anyone who hasn't read it. But polish that book up so it's more readable. It doesn't seem like it was written by someone who was over eager to finish the story and to develop the world and just push it out the door. Back then, I was so excited for people to see it um, that I did just push it out, and it was a lot of fun to do. But I wasn't really taking a good, close, critical look at the work before I did that. So, now with, over a decade under my belt since, and something like 30 books written since then, um, I took another shot at it. So thank you for sticking around. It was serialized on Patreon for anyone who doesn't know. It's still there. And the ebook version has been updated online. So if you already own the ebook version, check. You may have forgotten that you own it somewhere. You should be able to just go to your dashboard and whatever um, sort of retailer ecosystem you own it in and download an updated version. The update's actually going out today. So I'm not going to say that this edit is flawless, but I took a lot of time working through it and took multiple passes on it. And I can't say that it is head and shoulders better. It's presented to a point where I feel comfortable offering it to people now. I regret that I didn't write the sequel too soon after. But now I have been away from that for a couple of weeks. Um, and it was really unfortunate that the project landed, re-editing that, landed over the holidays. I didn't really want to take people to horror over the holidays, but it was what I was doing, and I didn't want to hide anything from the people on Patreon. And I only lost one person, and I don't even think I lost them permanently. I think they'll be back as soon as Spinrad Fringe is being offered, which is great. So I've been away from that for a couple of weeks, and I'm back in Spinrad Fringe land, which is great, back in that universe, which means I am finishing my study of the books there, especially broadcasts 14 and up. And that means reading them, listening to them when I can't be reading them, when I don't have time or have to do other things. If I can listen to them while I'm doing, important things, and important things that won't wait, I'll do that. And I have one of my notepads here. Ooh, geez, it's in a pile of other notes. So yeah, this is kind of the mess. Oh, I can't show you that. But yeah, so I can't show you any of this. What is this? Oh, that's actually, yeah. There's one page in there that isn't notes from the book. It's actually It's actually internal networking stuff. So yeah, that's not trying to show proof of work. Oh God, yeah, that's my hot page. Um, Not a term that's used commonly in writing, I don't think, but I think a few writers out there may appreciate it. So yeah, you can see this is from notes from the last, oh, I don't know, 3 days? Um, no, 2 days. Wow, okay. Um, my process is simple. I'm reading the books or I'm listening to the books, whatever I can do at the time. I put in at least 8 hours a day. So each book is about 11 hours. And oftentimes, and some are 14, oftentimes I have to rewind because if I'm doing something really thought critical, of course, I don't have the bandwidth to listen closely while I'm doing that. So I rewind a couple chapters and then listen to them over again. Maybe I'm programming my subconscious. That would be probably very good. Um, and, so that if it's, say, an 11-hour listen, um, I actually will complete that listen in something like 15 or 16 hours. So it's a lot of hours, but I'm not just idly um, listening and letting it flow over my ear holes. I'm actually trying to catch the details I need and the story beats that are really important to what I'm going to be writing next, and taking the character motivations, styles, and points of view into account. So a lot of these notes are just fine detail, but there are um, a lot of sort of reminders of what how these characters are motivated, which I find I generally don't need, but I write them down anyway. I don't have much trouble reconnecting to my characters, but this run through of previous material really helps. So what what does that mean in terms of note taking? Well, what do I do with the notes? Not much. I actually take these notes and I do mark little asterisks and boxes around some very important stuff that I may want later. And sometimes I do go searching through notes, and everything has a chapter reference. So sometimes there is just too much. If I like, for example, how I wrote a starfighter battle in a chapter a lot, I will actually write down, what chapter that was in what book, and a quick single sentence line on why I really liked it, what happened, as in the main event. And usually that in itself is enough for me to go, oh, okay, I remember. I remember writing that. I remember this style. I remember hearing it back or reading it. And if I need any more, the reference is there. So I can just skip back to that chapter and then listen to it. Or if the AI narrator is very, very bad, which it often is, I'll actually just go back and read it. And that's not so I can copy my own style. It's so I can pick up the good stuff and kind of use some of it moving forward or improve on it. I always want each, I always go into a Spinrad Fringe novel thinking this has to be the best Spinrad Fringe novel in the series. So that's challenging. um, and what happens to the notes after? Well, I have development notes, which these are not. Um, these are just studying. So I find if I write down the particulars of something that I want to remember, I have a much, much greater um, chance of recalling what I need later without even having to consult my notes. It's part of my memorization process. It's just a matter of hearing or reading what I wrote before and then rephrasing, summarizing what I experienced and writing it down. That way it works its way through my brain in a couple of ways, re-experiencing and interpreting and re-recording. So it doesn't take very long. I mean, I think these are notes from 1.5 books. Yeah. So, and what is the hot page? I can't show you any of this because, yeah, the hot page is usually 1 to 2 pages of ideas that I have for the next book or entire storylines for the next book that I have while I'm reviewing the material, or um, they are reiterations of concepts that I had for the next book before I started my review. Like on this hot page, the top third of one side is a storyline that I had going into the review. And I just thought, okay, so I'm not going to lose this concept, but I'm going to write down how the story, for example, the story with Simon on Rhodes with Remy, if you know, you know, is actually going to resolve. Because Remy's gone to Grace. That worked out how it worked out. There was only a temporary resolution in Samurai Squadron 3. But in Legion, there's going to be a full resolution, and here it is. Okay, just making sure no one gets a peek because I know what I know what it's like to be curious about what's going to happen and wanting to zoom in on something just to see what that may be, and being excited to take a peek ahead, like read ahead in the book per se, and then be disappointed once you know. uh, so I'm just making sure that this page does not get on screen. Anyway, so yeah, the top third of the page actually has how the issues with Simon's people is going to resolve in Legion. That's in here. And it's in full. I mean, it's 4 sentences, and one is, yeah, the book open. The next is, no spoilers here, by the way. Yeah, one is how the book could open, so we could actually open into this story, and it would be a pretty good open. Pretty good opening chapter. And the next is what happens to wrap that part of the story up and move us on to the next. So there would be a break there where another story intercedes, probably with Jake, because Jake has his own storyline. And the next part is, yeah, a chunk of the story that moves things towards a conclusion. And I've basically, the last sentence wraps it up. So, and it has the involved characters, it has everything. It's all in there. It's just 2 paragraphs. So I find this becomes part of my roadmap. So I'll finish my review, and then I will probably not look at the notes I had for well, basically I have a brief outline of what I want to do with um, Legion broadcast, Spinner Fringe broadcast 21. And I'm not going to look at those because I know them really well. I know I've been, plotting away at, like, okay, what do I want out of these characters? What do I want out of this story? What do I want to include? How do I want it to move? I've had that stuff on a whiteboard since before I finished Samurai Squadron 3, which is pretty remarkable because at that point I was full burning out. Like, absolutely burning out. So it's going to be interesting. Right now I'm just starting my listen through of Samurai Squadron 3, and I know I'll be pausing in certain places, stopping and yanking my paper copy out so I can read sections. And I'll probably listen to some sections and read that section as well, because your one study, which has not been fully corroborated, actually, I think it came out early last year, 2025, said that there wasn't much difference in mental process between listening to an audiobook and reading it. And I don't think that's been well corroborated. In fact, there are studies wrapping up now and that have wrapped up previously that show that indeed there is a difference in how we process what we read and what we listen to. So I've taken that to heart, and it's not like when I'm studying for another Spinward Fringe book, I like to double dip on the important stuff. So I'll listen to a chapter, and then if it's really important, I'll actually go search it up and read it on my laptop or on paper. Because all three of those experiences are different, believe it or not. I believe in the research that's coming out that shows that reading on a backlit device or an e-reader, so digitally, and reading on paper, and listening to the same material are all different experiences, and we remember them in slightly different ways. So, yeah. If the question is, and this question has come up a few times over the years, um, why don't you remember your books? I remember my books. That's not the problem. It's the details. It's how each of those chapters feel to read. Um, it's how those characters interact and what kind of things I might have missed before that I might want to include now, or may have cut for time and space, because these books can only be so long. I only have so much time to write each book. And yeah, I can't remember all the details. I think we're over 3 million words in this series. Um, and anyone who says that they can remember all the details and they don't have an eidetic memory or some kind of photographic memory is full of it. I've actually tested the theory. I've run into someone who says, I remember everything you've ever written online. And I said, all right, can you tell me bleh? And it was a thing from Carney's Tale. Totally wrong. In the moment, they were totally wrong. They couldn't remember, they blanked, they made something up, and it was wrong. And that wasn't just about me being right, that was about me going, okay, so am I missing a trick in my own series? Should I remember everything? And, that was sort of a naive point of view, because of course not. You can't remember everything. And if you do, I might remember it incorrectly, because um, every book now goes through this iteration of having it goes through an iterative process where I write an outline, and it's usually really quick stuff like you see on the page I won't let you see, the hot sheet. Um, and that's very non-specific. It's, these ideas aren't attached to chapters, they're attached to story and character beats. And then it goes into an outline, and I might drop, you know, parts of what's in that. I will probably change how that story works, for example, and then I will do another outline. I may do as many as 6 or 8 outlines. And this is in advance of writing the book, so I can go through iterations of the story that get better and worse and better and better. And, these pieces fit together in a certain way, and then I write it, and then I edit it. And usually I will proof it or edit it again after that, and I may rewrite sections. So when I'm trying to remember a book, which version am I remembering? Um, I may remember the plot outline version from version number 7 or version number 3. I think, yeah, I still have the notepad from this somewhere, I think. But Samurai Squadron 3, I think, went through 6 whole outlines. 6 whole outlines that ended up in a chapter to chapter summary. So somewhere there's a version of Broadcast 3 that has a summary of every single chapter, and part of it even has a timeline. So that was detailed. Like, I think almost anyone could pick that up and then write the book using that. That was like a James Patterson level outline. If you know anything about him, him and his team put out something like between 2 and 6 books a year using that method. I don't do it for speed. I do it so I don't have to start over and rewrite a new draft of my book after I've finished writing a draft. And that's what this does. It cuts drafts out and it improves the quality of the overall book. So who knows what version of the book I'm remembering. Um, that's why going to the final book is important. Also, my memory isn't that good. I mean, it's all right. Sometimes it takes a moment for someone to go into detail about a chapter to really ring the bell. But once I do, I have this awesome moment of uh, experience coalescence where I remember maybe what it was like to sit down and write that chapter, maybe what was going on that day. I remember pieces of the chapter, usually the major events, and sometimes that's not in line with what someone else may remember. I may remember what kind of experience I was trying to convey from the character's perspective, while other people may remember primarily simply what happened in that chapter, which is a great way to remember a chapter as a reader. Um, but from the writer's perspective, as you're about to see in this question, um, I may be more concerned with what the character is going through at the time, fictitiously in the chapter, of course. So all that comes rushing back in like a coalesced pile of experiences. So memory is tricky, um, especially since I remember things mostly emotionally. That's how my memory works. Um, if I have been affected by a moment, that's what I'll remember first. And sometimes that's the only thing I'll remember. Who was there primarily, how it affected me emotionally, and generally what happened. That's it. But, you know, the main thing is what the emotions of that moment were like. Um, which is a bit strange because I started this journey as a very detail oriented writer, and I think that's not a trait of someone who has an emotional memory. Anyway, I could be wrong. If you're a neurologist, chime in, or therapist. Uh, okay, so that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'm just starting my walkthrough of Spinward Fringe Samurai Squadron 3. And next is, since I just went through writing this series, I am going to be going through the Rogue books really quickly. Um, because if I have my way and there's room and the story moves in the right direction and through enough time, Rogue and her crew will appear in Legion. That's not a spoiler, it's just a fact at the moment, and it could change. There are a couple of things that have to happen in Legion. For one of them, at least, Rogue and at least some of her crew have to appear. That's not a spoiler. That's actually what is called a teaser. That's something I know about this book for a fact. Do I know that the Remy storyline with um, Simon will get wrapped up? Simon's people from Rhodes will get wrapped up. I don't know that for a fact yet. It's just a story I want to be one of the driving stories in the book. And I think it's highly likely that it will be a driving story in the book. It'll drive the way things are right now. Uh, the timeline will follow that. So it's pretty crucial. But if there's a much better story, um, then it might be secondary. But I hope not. I really want to bring that to a final and very satisfying conclusion, which is something that Legion is supposed to be all about. Getting into storylines that I want to wrap up or I can bring to a satisfying place. So let's get to the question segment. I'm going to answer this one question, and since this video has gone a little long, 32 minutes, I will finish off there, and then there will be another Q&A video to follow. So here we go. This is one that I've been wanting to answer for a while. It's just things I've run into a lot of distractions. Dark arts took me away from the science fiction mentality, and I didn't want to answer it while I was in the horror headspace. So that delayed things a couple of months. But Art asks, my apologies for not making today's AMA. That tells you how long it's been. A long time. And of course, Art watched it later, and I appreciate it. He had one question to pile on for the AMA, the Ask Me Anything. And it follows around chapter 27 or 28 of Clipper, when Rogue was taking a beating on the skin of the ship and she was captured. I had a YouTube video that was very downbeat, almost like I was soul searching for something very personal to me. A little bit of paraphrasing is going on because I'm not exactly reading this as it appears. Art's question is very well worded, but I'm editing it as I go, so it sounds a little bit more like me. It's a habit. Sorry. Art continues. I thought it might be personal. Maybe it was about Rogue and how to handle her capture and dismantling. Spoilers. If you're not reading the Rogue Element books, the first one's, where are we here? Oh, it's right there. Ooh, my camera is reversed, I think, or something. No, I'm just looking over my shoulder, which I don't usually do. The first one's right there. You can get the ebook for free. So you should go read that. No more spoilers. But Rogue hits a really hard time at one point, which you should expect in anything. Anything fiction should have a hard time for at least one character that affects the story. If not, why are you there? We all want to stick around for the recovery. Okay, so this goes outside of Spoilerland. Basically, actually, it goes right into it. Yeah, so I'm not going to read the rest of his question, but for a while, multiple times, Rogue's future was very uncertain. And some very bad things happened to Rogue along the way. And in a roundabout, well, in a very direct way, which I appreciate, Art asks, what might be behind the reaction he saw from me? Maybe, I think on the live writing video, I think that's what he's talking about. What was my early response? Ooh, yeah, my response was, hey, yeah, I'll answer this soon. Sorry. But I'll answer it now. So basically, he's asking about the visible effect that it had on me during a live writing video that I posted um, for patrons only. So you can get that on Patreon. Um, you can get the link to it on Patreon. And the visible effect was that I had major. I took pauses while I was writing, and he could see that, what I was writing was bothering me. So just writing my response in my head so I don't ramble for another half hour. All right, so I wrote Rogue Assembly, and then I took a break to write another book. And I wanted to see what the response to Rogue Assembly was. And the response was very good. So I knew I was going to write more Rogue books when I finished Rogue Assembly because I really enjoyed writing that character. I really liked the headspace that it took me to. And I liked the story style, and I knew that there was a lot more. There's a lot more that I could do with that character. Uh, did I get to do everything that I wanted? No, but that's kind of a spoiler for the end of this little spiel that I'm about to give. So I took a break. I wrote another book, and then I came back to. I think I wrote two. I think that was Rogue Squadron 2 and 3, and that kind of burned me out. And then I went back and I wrote the next Rogue book, and it became the Rogue Element series, which is kind of unfortunate naming because it was the name of a sub series in the Spinner Fringe book that kind of got buried years ago. The books remained, but they were just part of the main series, and having a sub trilogy in that would there's no point. I very quickly realized that people didn't care about that. They didn't want that like section of the Spinner Fringe series sort of earmarked because their habit was to read from the first Spinner Fringe book all the way to the current, maybe taking a couple breaks along the way. And they didn't care about having like a sub trilogy. Didn't matter. They would read from the book before the sub trilogy all the way through to some point where they needed to take a break, and then they'd come back to the series wherever they felt like they wanted to after stopping for a bit or going and reading some Stephen King or some, uh, different sci-fi um, for a while, and then coming back or taking a break from reading, which is actually what a lot of people have done during my series. They read to like 10 or something, they take a break from reading, find, oh, look, there's a 10.5. They read that, and then they're jump back in, which is great. I'm always happy to welcome someone back, no matter what book they're coming in on. Anyway, so I thought using the Rogue Element title was good, especially after taking a poll among my readers and asking them for names. It was just the best name. It kept on coming up, with me, and a few readers mentioned it. So I think that's how it went down anyway. So that's what I used, and that became the Rogue Element series. And I said, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to go from the second book all the way to the third, and we're just going to do it in one shot. And I'm going to plan each as a book. So if you read the second book, you get a whole story. If you read the third book, you get a whole story. And there's a whole story about how that turned into 4 books total, from Rogue Assembly to Rogue Clipper. I'll go into that some other time. But people who followed it on Patreon chapter by chapter, they know. So I did that, and by the time I was in Rogue Clipper, I knew those characters so well that at one point I actually could get some of the characters arguing in my head, like actively arguing. It felt like they were acting on their own. I realize to some schools of psychotherapy, that's a delusion. But I'm aware that it's happening, and it's one of those things where the phrase "I can stop anytime I want" actually matters. So, literally, I could get them going. I know I am ultimately in control, and I was, because there were times when, I'd get them going for a minute while I was just idling before writing or idling in the middle of writing. And Rogue's voice was the clearest. I think Mimi's voice was the second clearest. But of course, you have Duncan and Manny and all those guys. And it was great. It's a great way to develop dialogue and to develop a situation and find character motivation. It doesn't happen very often. Um, Other characters that I've heard in my head were Alice and Anne ages ago. Um, Alice, when she was a teenager, about to train in the Apex, right before she trained in the Apex program, and of course, I could hear Jake. He was the first character that I sort of conjured to the detail level where I could hear him. Way back in Broadcast Zero, or the First Light trilogy. Um, and that was fun. It's always fun to do that because it is really just imagination. It's a internal contrivance where you're getting the characters talking so you can actually differentiate them. Because if they all sound the same, you're doing something wrong. That's how it's gonna come across in the book. So this is my way of saying that occasionally I go a little bit crazy, and it only lasts a few seconds or minutes, and it happens maybe a couple times while I'm writing a book. But it happened a lot while I was writing the Rogue Element series, and it was always fun. That's one of the reasons why it was so much fun to write that, because the characters all sounded very different, and I hope it comes across in the book. And they were very easy to reach for. I didn't have trouble writing any of these characters, which was great. Um, so I knew Rogue extremely well, still do. If someone said, "Hey, we'll wait for Spinward Fringe," actually, if enough people said, "We'll wait longer for Spinward Fringe, can you just write another Rogue book?" Done in a second. Um, because to me, these two things are equal. I'm just as excited about writing Legion as I am about um, Rogue's books, but I did an okay job at wrapping up a 4-book series. It makes a fantastic quartet, in my opinion. And I know the character so well that when it came time to write her ultimate challenge and the thing that would change her forever, which was a traumatic experience for her fictitiously, um, where she is removed from all of her advantages, most of her advantages, and has to sort of think her way through a situation in a way that she hadn't had to do since she was created. When it came to that time, it was very hard because, I mean, a while ago I went out for dinner with a couple of friends, and I half jokingly said 2/3 of my friends are fictional. That can actually ring true a bit because I get very involved with my books when I write them, to the point where I have another project going on, and I need, as a hobby, um, So not in the time that I dedicate to writing. But I need to finish that project before I start actually writing Spinrad Fringe Legion, because I don't know. I might just drop off the face of the earth while I'm writing that. And all you'll see from me, the only sign of life, will be 2 chapters a week on Patreon. So that's possible because I get deeply involved in my work, and I'm usually swept away by character. Which character am I writing? Which characters are interacting in my head on the page? And I love that sort of temporary obsession. I've done it over and over again. The work is always better. And whenever I am finished, there are a couple of days when I am disillusioned. I have no idea if what I wrote was any good, and maybe a little bit malaised, if that's actually a word. Um, in a bit of malaise because I'm sad that the adventure is over, at least for the time being. And with Rogue, I had been writing her for a year straight, and I was very involved with that character. I knew her extremely well. I was very. One of the reasons why a scene with her and another person at the bitter end, I think, is so emotional, but also so, uh, I'd say understated, but I think more tender is the better phrase, is because I wanted to be careful with how I presented that moment. And for an hour or so while I was writing it, I was living it. I was there. I could picture everything. I made sure I did my visualization exercises. I made sure I knew where each character was coming from, how it would make Rogue feel, and I was very careful to present exactly what I was experiencing um, as I wrote it. And I think that scene turned out beautifully, and it is a unique scene in the entire series. And yeah, it happens in the lobby of the Bitter End, which is the big bar they have there, and I won't spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read the books. To know more, you'll have to read them. Um, but, and yeah, I do actually have a reader with an eidetic memory, and talking to them was a hoot. You know who you are. So I imagine that that's just coming up like that. Because I gave you just enough. Everyone else, I hope you know what I'm talking about. But then you fast forward, it's in the same book, and she has never been more disadvantaged, well, since her creation. And while I was writing that chapter, I was on video because I like short. Okay, making this part of it really short because it's very much an aside, and I'm getting tired of them. Tired of the tangents. AI is screwing stuff up. It is doing wonderful stuff, but it is also screwing stuff up. And one of those things is writers who do all their own work are being accused of using AI to write their books. I'm not going to lie, I use Pro Writing Aid as a proofreader to help me find extra commas, missing words, and little. Uh, that's actually mostly it. It does make suggestions every once in a while because they're trying to entice me to pay for tokens that do actually rewrite chunks of the book, and every time that comes up, I turn it off because one, I like writing these myself, and two, it's awful. Uh, but yeah, so that's as far as I go with AI. But there are accusations going against legitimate authors um, who are independent, and they're being ruined by accusations that they're just having AI write their books. So, to combat that, I put myself on video. I'm pointing at my video camera or my the web camera, because I'll be doing this again, everything's still set up. So I can have direct evidence to point to that says, look, I've recorded myself writing several chapters. You can see the playback. I don't do that, right? Um, I mean, my AI is a glorified comma hunter. That's about it. uh, and it's not like ChatGPT or anything. It's actually AI that's made for writers, and you set your level, right? You tell it what you don't want it to do, tell it what you want it to do, and this thing is pretty good. Um, Once a couple of spell checkers catch up, and they're catching up quickly, I'll probably dump my subscription and go back to just using a spell and grammar checker, because that's all I need. I just need the help of checking. Anyway, that is a big fat aside to say that I was on video because I needed evidence against any accusations that say my hands are just huge in this frame. I have to look at that. Um, Scatterbrain today. Um, yeah, so I use the recordings as evidence that I'm not using AI to create the work. I'm responsible and happy about it. Only in this case, happy about it is not the right phrase, because after growing attached to the rogue character, knowing her better than most characters, and investing so much in so much time in telling her story, and sort of after a while, it doesn't necessarily feel like, and this isn't something unique to me by far, it doesn't entirely feel like you are writing the character as much as it feels like you are with the character. And it is a wonderful feeling because you can kind of, it's like there's a partition of your mind that is that character temporarily, and you're kind of seeing what she does. And what was happening to her in the chapter as I was recording my reactions on video was positively malicious and cold-hearted. So yeah, that has a emotional impact on me. And I would have it no other way, because if it doesn't have an emotional impact on me, um, and if I don't somehow put that in the writing, how much of an emotional impact is it going to have on my reader? Well, I mean, uh, that's really the way I look at it. So when there are big emotions in my writing, usually there's some reflection of that, or that's a reflection of something that I'm feeling while I'm writing it. And that means that my words, even if they may take a few edits, uh, are being effective, right? Writing, this isn't my line, and I'm paraphrasing, but writing is a form of telepathy. That's Stephen King. And I think he may have borrowed it, but I'll credit him because that's the first place and last place I saw that. And I would add that our writing careers are a reflection of refining that telepathy down to a point where you can make someone uh, imagine, think, feel, or consider exactly what you're writing. You can get the situation and the thoughts across as perfectly as possible, so you can put someone else in, someone who's reading, into the shoes of your character, or convey exactly what you want for their consideration. Right now, that's what I'd add to it. And this has proven useful, of course, in conveying information. Duh, everyone knows, if you read it, you might find some information in what you read. Um, but also in developing empathy. And I'm not saying that I'm teaching the world to love or anything else like that. But every writer, um, if you work at it, can maybe make someone feel something. And if you read enough books that actually uh, make you do that, you develop your empathy. This is scientific fact now. It's been studied by a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and they've found over and over again that it's true. Uh, Habitual readers have greater empathy. And I guess, as the writer, while I write tragic things happening to my character, it is difficult because I don't want that to happen to my characters, the characters I like anyway. Um, I don't even take much pleasure in doing that to bad guys much anymore because I end up putting myself, if the uh, looking at a chapter I just reread from the end of Samurai Squadron 2, where Volus McCann, um, something terrible befalls him at one point. I had to put myself in his shoes because I was writing from his perspective. And that wasn't actually, I remember as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I got to read this because I remember I didn't really enjoy writing this chapter. I kind of want to revisit why. I want to sort of examine it as a character moment and as a experience as a writer. And sure, it didn't have the same effect on me as, writing Rogue's powerless moment did. But rereading that, I kind of nodded and laughed at myself and said, yeah, there is no doubt something horrible is happening to this person, fictional person. And yeah, anyone with an ounce of empathy is, even though they might not like him, probably won't, um, is going to sit back and go, ooh, that's grisly. That's not good for anybody. So, okay, so if you've only been half listening, I'll give you the shortest answer possible to this question. You saw me react to it because I'm going to sound so artsy like this. In order to render Rogue helpless and put her in a terrible situation, I had to mentally transport myself there. And some of that also comes from, yeah, you draw on personal experiences when you can. And I think everyone has felt helpless out at some point. And yeah, so I was sort of back there, but mostly just doing a terrible thing to a character I liked because, and not allowing me to think of whatever came after. So, um, that was not a fun moment. There are a lot of chapters that I write in my career, I've written in my career that were not fun to write, but they're very important to get right. That was one. I think I edited that chapter 6 or 7 times, and I am still surprised at how few changes I made. The only change that I did make was her ultimate fate. So at the end of his question, he asks if the plan was always to kill Rogue off. I'm not spoiling a thing by saying that at one point that was the plan. Did I? Did you read the books? If you didn't, you're going to have to read them to find out. Yeah. Um, I enjoy putting people in that position because I know most people will enjoy those books. They'll surprise you. Uh, First one's free. Anyway. Hey, people say I don't plug myself enough. So, I think that's it for this video. It better darn well be, because I just went over an hour and I'm sorry. There were a lot of asides. I'm going to get better at this. For now, this is about as good as I can do it without starting over again. And I really hope you enjoyed it. I would love to get your feedback, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Patreon, where the link to this video will appear. Um, I know everyone has their handout right now, everyone has a Patreon, but my patrons really help me, especially in these times where I'm working my butt off to study my old work so I'm ready to do excellent things with the next work. And Legion is critically important. So I'm going from the last book in a series, which is massively important in the Rogue Element series and to any series, to a crucial book in the Spinward Fringe series. So no pressure, but I do want to do I am doing my homework, and um, a little support on Patreon really helps me get through those times. And I want to reward that by posting videos like this and better, hopefully better, in the future, fairly regularly, especially when I'm not posting 2 chapters a week, which is my regular goal as a writer. Not just to finish 2 chapters a week, but to finish and do a couple edits on each chapter and then post them on Patreon at that cadence. So I appreciate that. I appreciate Cal Matar, who stuck with me through my whole experiment on um, Twitch TV as I shared my gaming hobbies. Because over the Christmas holidays and a little bit after and a bit before, I basically was working and then playing games because I had no money. So instead of just gaming in the dark, I did it in public and jumped on Twitch TV. That has stopped because I don't have time for it anymore, and because, I don't know, the experiment didn't turn into something that I wanted to continue for now. Right now, I think I just want to be wrapped up in writing, and I have another project going on that is taking, like this week, it's taken none of my time. Um, yeah, none. But, every once in a while, it takes a couple hours here and there, and it attaches to another hobby of mine that is continual and gets me going out of the house, which I'll talk about some other time. So, Kalmatar stuck with me through the whole gaming experience, and that was a great, great thing. So I'm thankful for that. He was also my first subscriber on Twitch. I don't know when I'll be back, so if you're subscribing to me on Twitch, it's a good time to unsubscribe, because all of my professional action is going to happen on Patreon. So I guess this is where I drop the addresses. Patreon.com/Randolph Lalonde. That's where you can find me. And yeah, if you have any questions, if you have uh, comments that are constructive, please post them on under this video or on Patreon, where I'll see them, because I see everything there. I'll see you later, and I'll probably record another one of these in the next day or two. Take care. Oh, and thank you to Patrick D. Eamond. His music is available on YouTube, and he provided music for whatever I needed on Patreon while I was doing my live writing stuff on Twitch. He's been extremely generous with his talent, and I really appreciate it. And he's an old friend of mine. Take care.